We welcome you all here. It is my pleasure to take a second to introduce our subject matter expert today. He hails from Oklahoma County, just past Oklahoma City and Choctaw. He is a professor. He's an entrepreneur. Let's give it up for Rob Miles.
All right, thank you. As she said, I am a professor of entrepreneurship at the University of Science and Arts of Oklahoma. But I began my career as in both inside sales and outside sales for a minor league baseball team in Dallas. Did that for about 3 or 4 years, then became an operations manager, which is where I really got to know process mapping. Decided I needed a big boy job after that and got into banking and worked the majority of my career in commercial banking before I moved to Oklahoma. Moved here and started my own company called 1,000 Paces. I also am the owner of Stretch Lab in Norman, and then I'm also an adjunct professor as well as the Economic Development Council Chair for University of Science and Arts. So I have 4 jobs. It's a lot of fun. But so process mapping, I don't know that Henry Ford created it, but he was definitely one of the ones that pioneered it. I'm reading his biography right now, or listening to it on Audible. If you guys haven't listened to it before, it's free, by the way. But the way his mind works is fascinating. Every chapter is him breaking down a process and understanding the constraints or things that are holding back the way that it should be, and then him developing a way to mitigate the problem. And so in the late 1800s, he actually inherited his family farm, and he hated farming, mainly because it was so inefficient. So he broke down the entire process from start to end, where he's plowing the fields to he's dropping off the shipments at the co-op. And basically what he decides is that the biggest inefficiencies of farming are plowing the fields and traveling back and forth from town. So he decides he's going to create a steam engine to help plow the fields and get him to town. But he breaks down that process of a steam engine to decide that the steam engine was too inefficient, or actually too dangerous, to commercially produce as a vehicle. And so he dives into internal combustion engines. And so then he just continues to build this process to the point where he grows Ford Industries into the juggernaut that it is today. So just to give you a brief introduction of what process mapping is, I wanted to show you guys a really simple example in a way that has changed something that I do. So I assume everybody in here has to wake up in the morning. And that's the reason I chose such a simple process. It's something that everybody does and can relate with. But if I break down the way that I wake up in the morning, I decided that I wanted to add in 20 minutes of stretching. I thought it would be more beneficial for my health. But I couldn't figure out how to add that into my schedule. So I broke down each step of what I do. Start off, my alarm goes off. I am terrible at getting up. I'm the worst person to have to wake up. And I usually let it run for about 10 minutes until my wife gets mad and kicks me and turns it off. So then I have to shut off my alarm because it's moving. It's going off, so I have to shut it off. Well, then I get coffee. Then I read for about 30 minutes. Then I decide I have to get up and get ready. So I start by turning on my music. Hop in the shower. That takes about 10 minutes. I get dressed, I fix my hair, I brush my teeth. Now what's important about these steps is they can't be interchangeable, right? So I can't fix my hair and then get dressed, then you mess up your hair, right? So you have to understand the right steps of the process. Then the music's going, so I have to turn it off. Then I get breakfast. Then I have to get my son, and I have to drop off my son before I'm allowed to go to work. Now the problem is, if I were to break down this step right here, my son's 2 years old. Today, actually. Today's his birthday. So he can't get himself ready. So if I were to break this down, there's a whole separate process of my wife getting Hank ready so I can take him to daycare. So I wanted to figure out how I could add in 20 minutes of stretching. So I'm looking for all the constraints. So one of my constraints is, well, it takes me way too long to get up. The other constraint is it takes me 30 minutes to read. And then the third constraint is the time that it takes me to get ready. So I couldn't really break down this anymore And I enjoy my reading. I think it's beneficial to my health as well, so I didn't want to cut into that time. The only time that I could put anything in there or take anything out was the time that it takes me to get up. So just by being a little bit more disciplined, now I can add things into my routine. So today I want to tell you about what process mapping is. Hopefully that helps paint a picture of what it is, but more importantly, how it can be beneficial to you and how to start your own. I originally came across this when I was a operations manager for the Frisco Rough Riders in Dallas. And I was in sales for 3 years, and one of the biggest problems we always had was our box office. They were always losing stuff. Things were always very inefficient, I guess is the best way to say it. And the position came up right before the season, and I was like, man, I'm going to go down there, I'm going to fix it. This is my mission for the next year. And I got down in the box office, and we had a problem where people would show up to games and the seats were double booked. So if you think about a ballpark, I can't just create a new seat. So if somebody's showing up and both people have tickets from us, they were legitimate tickets, and they expected to sit in the same seat, like that's a big issue because I can't just move them, they get upset. So what I did was I created a process map just like this, and it was one of those things, we thought the process was so easy that we didn't have to map it out, but all these issues were happening, we're just going to take the time and do it. So back then, remember, we still had paper forms and things, so we did have a CRM system called Artix. It's ran by Ticketmaster. So the reps would close the deal. You got to think there's a whole process before that of how they close the deal. They would move their seats into the cart just like you do online. They would have a code that would change the type of benefits they get with their seat package. Then they would fill out a paper form. They would drop off the form into a bin. I would get the bin. I would pick up the forms in the bin. I'd bring them down to the box office. And then me and my assistant would divvy them up. I would go through half of them. She'd go through half of them. And so we're looking at this, we're like, there's no fat in this. I don't know where the issue is. So I started following forms directly from the box office down to where I was. Come to find out that my assistant was somebody who liked to pick fights with people. She held grudges. And I found out that she would pick fights with some of the sales reps, and she would either purposely lose forms or she'd send them back up and they'd get lost. And so that's how we were double selling tickets. So it became a big issue, and we figured out the problem, and we were allowed to move on. Here recently, I've had to recreate this. So I just bought into a franchise model. And we've had some issues getting open, and the biggest problems were our sales process. And so once again, I sat down, I spent an entire weekend doing this and going from the beginning of the process to the end. And this is the sales process. You can find this in any marketing book, but what I had to do is figure out how to make it my own. And so from our sales process, we start with marketing. So our leads come in from online. They create a task in our customer management system. We create the lead, then we have to contact them. So we have to call them and physically, or get them to come into the studio physically. That starts our sales process, which if they book, then they move on to the onboarding process and then the follow-up process. Now where we keep getting people lost is if we contact them, they don't answer, then they go directly to the follow-up. And if they once they answer, then we start over the sales process. So it ends up being reciprocal. So it seems pretty easy in my mind, but you got to think each one of these has their own separate process. So my wife does this professionally for Ernst & Young, so one of the big 5 accounting firms, and she works on global teams. And even she uses PowerPoint. Well, they got her new program this year, but up until this year, she was using PowerPoint, which is the easiest way to do this. But we spent an entire weekend talking about each step that goes into this, and we kept getting lost, and it was frustrating. And so basically what we did was we started using sticky notes. And this was such a good thing because we could brain dump and we could talk about different things, and we could just write them down on the sticky note and post them up there, and then, oh, that's not in the right place, we got to move it. Or that process is inefficient, and we need to get rid of it altogether. So remember, there were 5 steps in our process, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see there's 5 different colors of sticky notes. Each section is a different process that we started. And then up in the top right corner, you can see all the things that we were talking about or doing that we needed to get rid of in our process. So all of these sticky notes up here were things that we talked about that we decided were fat that we could cut. And then I'm not going to read all of these to you because it would take too long, but then we broke down each process and how it comes into our system. So if I back up for a second, you can see marketing is our first step. So marketing is done in two ways. It goes from our franchise focus is our big commercial marketing partner, and then we have grassroots, and each one of them have different flows to the end. So we start here, they come in from franchise focused or grassroots, they go through their entire process, and then they continue on to contacting. So if you look back here, contacting is the second step. Moving forward is contacting here. And then you can see that they start to transition. So I still have several different flows, but you can then ask a question. So did they actually answer? If yes, then they continue on to sales. If no, then we go to the follow-up. So that's how it becomes reciprocal and moves into a different process based on what happens or the events that happen. Like I said, I'm not going to sit here and read all these to you unless you guys just have specific questions on how we tackled something, but then we moved on to our sales process, our onboarding process, and then finally our follow-up process. So once we got everything mapped out, like I said, we went back and we started cutting things, and or we decided that maybe we need a different person to handle this, or we didn't have the right people in place. And so what we're really looking for is making sure that we had the right people in the right place doing the right job. And then we could follow up on the responsibilities. So what I did was I went through and I started writing down everything that my general manager was supposed to be able to do. And it ends up being like 3 pages worth of stuff. I'm going, oh, no wonder she doesn't have any time. No wonder she's not getting things done. It was too long, too much. And so we started divvying it up and saying, okay, well, this is something the sales manager probably actually has time to do. So we can move things from the general manager to the sales manager just based on being able to visually see it at this point. If you're just starting off and you don't have all your resources in place, this is a great place to start. So I can go through and I can say, well, we have leads coming in from our marketing. How are we going to call them? Oh, I guess we need a telephone. So if you're trying to plan this out in your head, say you're an entrepreneur just starting a business, now you can start making a budget of all the different things that you need to be successful. So I went through, made sure we had the right people in the right place, made sure that the responsibilities were divvied up in the right way, made sure that we had everything for them to be successful, and then making sure that we were meeting our budgets. So, man, I got through that a lot quicker than I expected to, but in conclusion, it's not easy. Everybody I talk to about this is scared to start it. They don't know where to start, which pretty much, if it is a process like this that continues to start over and over, it doesn't really matter where you start, just as long as you get started, because eventually it'll figure itself out. But it does take time. It is frustrating, but it has been so beneficial to me in not only working in a career, but also starting my own business. You can identify any type of bottlenecks, like I did in my original one about getting ready. I can see exactly how long things are taking if that's something that I want to do. And I can figure out what's taking the most amount of time and how can I get more efficient at that. You can also create process improvements. So like I said, we mapped everything out that my general manager was doing and went, oh my gosh, no wonder she doesn't have any time. Now I need to fix that process. Or the process was broken from the beginning. She didn't know how to get started on something, so now I can go back and create that process for her to take care of something. But creating standard operating procedures. I can't be there every day. My general manager's having to take time off this week. So what are we supposed to do? Anytime a new employee comes in, or they have to take over for somebody else, they can go back and look at our processes because these are our standard operating procedures. This is the way everything should be done. So it helps you in training. It helps you if somebody takes a day off, understanding exactly what they're supposed to do on a day-to-day basis, and keeps everything in line. And last but not least, making sure you have the right people and the right processes in the right seat doing the right things. staffing has been just an absolute nightmare for a lot of people. That's the number one complaint I get talking to business owners right now. And so this is something that you can make sure that everybody understands exactly what they're supposed to do, make sure that they're getting it done on time and doing the right things. And if they can't do that, then maybe they're not the right person, but you can explain that job to somebody else in the future. They do have processes, but they're having trouble getting people to stick to the processes, which is probably the second. I mean, that goes right along with the biggest complaint that people have is, you know, making sure you have the right people in the right place. But what we've had to do is, because we've had the same issue, is go through and make sure people are checking off in certain situations. So we have an end of the day task list, clean the bathrooms, things like that. Simple stuff that's easy to skip that everybody was skipping because it's not fun to do. So now they have to go through and they actually check it off on a list. And so we figured out how to create that list based off the process map. The other thing is making sure that somebody's always checking up on it or building in redundancies. So I have multiple people that check on my tasks. That keeps them accountable because they know somebody else might be coming in to check in on it. Also, they have to check it off the list. So if it doesn't get done for the day, me as a manager can go in and I can see who's done what and who hasn't done whatever it is that they were supposed to do. So catering especially, because you have an entire manufacturing process, right? So if you're creating cakes or whatever, you're going to have the exact same sales process that I had. Where was it? There. So you're still going to have to find people to sell to. And it may change. Maybe you're not doing online marketing like I am, but you're still going to have word of mouth marketing. Somehow you're generating leads and finding new people to sell to. Then you have to figure out how to get in front of them, contact them, and start the sales process. Then you still have to, most people in catering want some type of quote or invoice of some sort. So you'll have an entire sales process there. What you may not have is the onboarding, because caterers usually take care of everything. And then follow-up is key. So I did a speech a couple months ago here about the sales process, and you cannot beat the follow-up. So that's the thing that most salespeople forget, is to continue to contact new leads and make sure that existing sales are happy and continuing on that word of mouth. So for a brand new startup, this is exactly where I'd start. The sales process and making sure that everything that needs to happen is being taken care of on some point. Just to back up a second, I should have said this earlier, I would make sure that you have your brand, you understand your brand, and you know your customer, because those two things will change the way your process works. So if you're a catering person and let's compare like a high-end catering person to somebody like McDonald's, right? They're both serving food, but the end customer is so different that it would change their process. McDonald's is all about efficiency and making sure everything's going fast, where a big caterer would want to slow the process down, take more time, make sure the processes are built in so that they understand that there's additional value to what they're bringing. So I bought into a franchise because I love the process. And that's really what you're doing when you're buying a franchise, you're buying their business model. And the number one thing that you buy is their branding and their processing. When I bought in, they gave me the process. They didn't put it in this exact form. I had to figure this part out on my own, but they told me this is how you do things. This is what happens to initiate the process. This is how you go through the entire stretch, everything like that. So, I mean, those guys are selling this stuff for 50, 60 grand a piece. So, I mean, that's how valuable it can be. But yeah, even we knew the process. We knew it forwards and backwards, but it was all in our head. And we were still confused. And it's a simple process. We're not a big studio. But writing it down helped us clear up all those lines and helped us build in redundancies and checklists to make sure that everything was being taken care of. So for a new entrepreneur, they can, like you said, build up the process, make sure that it's straight in their head, make sure that they can explain it to somebody else, figure out who they need to bring in to help them. So, there's things that I'm good at, there's things I'm not so good at. I need to make sure that those processes are still there and I can explain it to somebody else, because I can get somebody else to take off those things that I'm not good at. Then this is also a great place to start your budgets. So if you're a brand new entrepreneur, you can go through and see exactly what equipment and things that you need to launch your business. All right, so I have 3 different types of customers. Take a step back. These are coming from our marketing. So our marketing is mainly online. Then I have 3 different types of customers. I have new customers, walk-in customers, and existing customers. And so I have different processes for each one. A new customer I have already contacted in this slide. So I've already set up my first visit. And then once they walk in, they will check in at the front desk. They will meet with a flexologist, who's my version of a personal trainer, and they will conduct a evaluation. So we have what's called a MAPS machine, where you do 3 front squats in front of an iPad, and somehow it tells you every muscle that's having an issue. I have no idea how it works, but it's amazing. And so that gives my flexologist a place or a point of reference on where to start stretching you. So once he does his first evaluation, then he completes the stretch, and he has an entire script that he has to go through. And then they meet up with my sales associate, and then they either buy or they don't buy. If he does buy, then he continues on to the onboarding. So I have a mobile app where you can go in and book all your stretches and things like that. So we want to make sure that that's all taken care of. They understand how to use it. If they don't buy, then they continue into our follow-up. So you guys know what the best sales book ever is?
No, Rob, what's the best sales book ever?
Dr. Seuss, Green Eggs and Ham. You know why? Because he sells it just by being consistent and following up. So I forget the actual statistic, but something like 60 to 80% of sales that close after 5 points of contact. So that's why follow-up is so important. The majority of people, by the time they get to this point, they've only been contacted 3 times. And so I've built in my follow-up process that I have 3 more points of contact. So 80% of people won't buy initially, they'll buy in the follow-up process. So walk-in customers are people that I've never talked to. I didn't call on the phone. They just happen to see my studio and walk in. So once they walk in, I figure out who they are, that they don't know anything about Stretch Lab, and that I have to they go straight into the same process as my new customers. But existing customers are a little bit different. Mainly, I don't do the first visit evaluation. They already understand what they're doing, but they do have a monthly valuation that's in the follow-up process. Actually, it's this existing 3-month follow-up process. I do have a question mark there because that's a question that I have for my general manager on how she conducts something. So from here, I went and I wrote all of these. I wrote out all the instructions, and there's things that I highlight that I have questions for, make sure that we're doing the right things, or maybe I just don't know what she does and I need to get back with her. And then the other thing that we do is called pop-ups, where we go to venues and we set up and we do stretching there, golf courses, things like that. We've actually done them here before. And so that is a 4th customer that I'm looking at. Basically, I schedule it, which is in the contact. And then I come over here, I confirm before I go out. We've had more than several people cancel on us last minute. So we built in confirming that we're supposed to be there. Then we set up, we enjoyed the event, and we tear down. But then it goes into, we have to collect all the leads, and there's an entire process of collecting leads and following up with those. So it does change significantly. The other thing that I forgot to mention is once I completed all this, now I can go back and I can build in goals. So I know that I need to sell 20 to 30 new members each month, and I've got about a 10% close rate. So if I reverse engineer that, then I know that I have to bring in I have to close 30 to 40% of the people that are coming in. And back here, I can see that I have to bring in 150 to 200 leads. So once you start doing the math of how much you close, then you can build in goals for each step as well. Understanding your customer, understanding your values, and we call it show up and throw up, where you start spewing benefits, kind of like I'm doing now. But a good salesperson should let the customer speak 80% of the time, and the salesperson should only speak 20% of the time. Asking questions, making sure you understand what your customer needs before you start presenting, and making sure you answer the questions as you're presenting. So think of a used car salesman. When you go out and look at a new Dodge Challenger, all they do is start spewing all the benefits. It's got this many horsepower and this many doors or whatever, this many cup holders. But they don't actually, usually don't take, there's really good car salesmen too, but the majority of them don't take the time to understand why you're looking at that car. They just assume they know and start spewing all the benefits of it. All right. Thank you, guys.